Kia ora koutou, no mai, haere mai, tēnei kōrero. It's fantastic to have you here tonight. And it's my great pleasure to be able to welcome our new National Secretary, Stephanie Mills, with us today. This here is an opportunity for our members to ask questions directly of Steph. Shortly, I'm going to pass over to her to be able to share a little bit about her vision before we move through to the Q&A. But before we get there, I just wanted to open with a whakatauki. Ko e mate whiki, mate ururoa. Don't die like an octopus, die like a hammerhead shark. And I thought, given that we are talking about a vision for NZEI Te Reo, that was really appropriate. Ko wai au, ko Liam Rutherford Takawingoa, ko o te manakura o NZEI Te Reo. Like I said, it's fantastic to have you here. Welcome along, Steph. I'll pass over to you. It'd be great to hear a little bit about who you are and where your professional career's gone before you move into your presentation. Over to you.
Kia ora koutou e te whānau o Te Reo. Ko wai au, ko Stephanie Mills tōku ingoa. Ko Manaia, te maunga. E rū nei ki tōku nākau. Ko Matapauri, te moana. E mahi anei aku maharahara. Kei te mihi aha ki te mana whenua o te rārohi o Matapauri, ko Rangi Whakahu, me Ngāti Wai hoki. Ko Gertrude Rawa ko Spray nā waka, ko Donald Alexander McLean te tangata, ko McLean tōku hapu, he tau iwi ahau. I whanau ai I whangarei, engari ko taputaranga tōku kāinga in nai. I'm Stephanie. I'm of proud Scottish descent, originally from via Nova Scotia. My waka arrived here at the Waipu River in Te Tai Tokerau in 1856, and I currently live in the beautiful Taputaranga Island Bay in Wellington, and I'm looking out on the south coast. Can't quite see the seaward Kaikoura tonight, but I like the feeling that I can see Te Waipounamu and be in the head of the fish at the same time. My background originally was professionally in journalism, and then I got very involved in the anti-nuclear movement and ended up working in the UK for the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. That was a while ago. I then started working for Greenpeace and was involved in the campaign to stop nuclear testing at Mororoa and to end plutonium shipments that were a global issue between the UK and Japan. So I moved from there to being a suburban mother of 3 children in Island Bay in Wellington, and my eyes were really open to education, although my whānau has a number of teachers, including my mother, my brother, my aunt, 2 aunts, and my grandparents. So there's been plenty of NZEI Te Reo members in my family. But it was really going to Play Centre and engaging with Te Whāriki and really starting to understand the pedagogy of that document and the way in which children's growth and learning comes together that really got me excited about education. And then coming to Te Reo as the communications director in the first instance was where I made my first journey in with this union. So that's a little bit about me, and my life here at NZEI Te Reo has spanned the life of my children's schooling. So it's been always fantastic to have that personal connection with kaiako at pick up and drop off, at the parent teacher student interviews, at the school fair, along the school fence, at the pedestrian crossing, on the side of the soccer pitch, through my time here at NZEI Te Reo. Do you have any hard questions there, or shall I move to the presentation?
No, I'm looking forward to your presentation, but I will just drop in, if people could introduce themselves in the chat, who they are, where they're from, and as you're listening to Steph's presentation, feel free to pop questions into the chat and we'll come to those at the end of it. Let's move on to your presentation, Steph.
Great, I'm going to share my screen in the best tradition of Zooms. So here we go. at the beginning here. So I was asked to speak to my vision of the organisation, grounding it on where we are now in 2022. And I chose the whakatauki that we currently have been given for the Principles campaign to Ao Katoa, which is about speaking to the world in the far horizon. And I think that's a really important concept. So I've been thinking about NZEI Tururoa as an intergenerational organisation. Intergenerational because as Kaiako and Kaimahi in education, we span a lot of different age groups, but also because in education, we're always thinking about the next generation. And so I thought about the vision between now and 2040, the 200th anniversary of the signing of Te Tiriti, as a particularly important time span to have for our union. And I think one of the things I felt I could bring to the union was the ability to maintain foresight while we're still in the daily battle for the things that we need today. And it's also deeply personal. I've already mentioned my children, so introducing Marika, who's my daughter, and Lily Okalani, who's my goddaughter. They're born on the same day. She's the daughter of my best friend. My daughter was born in London. Lily was born in Tamaki Makaurau. And I'm just thinking through their journey when I think about what we want out of our education system. And I was thinking that a pepe born today will be leaving school in 2040. So that's, in some ways, 2040 seems a long way away, and another way that makes it feel quite close as a parent. And also thinking that tamariki starting school now will be leaving primary schooling in 2030, which is the distance that we talked about when we commissioned the Puautanga review of what was needed to really resource schooling well. So these gorgeous children are kind of always in my mind when I'm thinking about what we as a union are here for and what we want to achieve for members. So I had 5 big ideas that I have kind of brought with me, and they're really building off the work that the union's been doing, but I guess trying to make them concrete. And they're all ambitious, they're all stretch targets, because I think that's what we're trying to do in education, is always think about where we're taking people next. And the first idea reflects our commitment to, as Te Tiriti partners, to moko te ao, our idea that we want to be a bicultural country, have a bicultural system, be fit for purpose. And so my goal is that we move to become a bilingual and bicultural union by 2030. That doesn't mean that everybody in the union or union members are all fluent in te reo, but it is about really normalising it within the organisation, having members able to speak and uphold the mana of te reo in all our processes. And I think that's where we're seeing the education system go. And so that's also where we need to be thinking ourselves as a union. It's more than just about te reo, but I think that for anybody who knows te reo or knows another language, learning a language holds the key to unlocking a lot of the concepts and values of a culture. And so I'm always very keen to try and encourage people to learn te reo and any other language for that matter. I think the second big idea was that we can build back better, that we have to have that ambition for our education system, for our schools and ECE services, that the COVID pandemic is a kind of crisis-tunity, which is a sort of nasty American phrase. But I think what it means is that in times of unprecedented disruption that COVID has brought us, we do have a chance to think of new ways in which we can all, if you like, lift our game, change our roles, think about what's normal and whether we want a new normal. And you may remember in 2020, some of our ECE services members got very active calling for a shovel-ready, rather than just shovel-ready change to the system, that actually people are a really key component, and we need to get shovel-ready when we're thinking about our social health and education services, not just our roading infrastructure and forestry and job creation. So I think that idea that we're at a real pivot point in our society at the moment, and it's sometimes hard to see. I mean, I'm currently stuck at home in isolation for my third lot of isolation this time because I'm COVID positive myself. It's sometimes hard to see the big picture in that situation, But I think it's important that and that's one of the roles that we as a union play is leading that thinking in our system. I'm really ambitious for our union. We could be double our size, and I think that's what our goal should be. We're strong, traditionally strong in primary, but there are thousands of primary and ECE teachers and support staff who are not yet members of the union. And I believe fundamentally that we have power as people when we come together. And so I think what we need to do is make sure that we are relevant and engaging for people who are not yet in the union. And for a lot of people, it's because they don't see the relevance or they haven't been asked. And so that's on all of us. I think it's not just something staff do or just something some members do. It's really thinking about how we as a union can be stronger. To do that, we have to win. We have to win. I mean, nobody wants to join a team that's kind of a bunch of losers. So I reckon as a union, we've got a proud history of winning because educators are a united bunch. We're an articulate bunch, and the wins we've had, whether it's pay parity, whether it's the pay equity win for teacher aides, whether it's kua taitoa, they're not enough in themselves, but they are all big successes, and they are the result of enormous collective effort. And so what we need to keep winning in 2022 are the foundations for the next stretch of change that we want to see, the positive change we want to see. So things that will bring better conditions, more staffing, parity of resourcing for people working in schools, those pay equity settlements that we're struggling so hard to get for support staff, for admin and site-ex and librarians, the pay parity process finished and properly done in ECE. These are some of the really core foundations that we want to build on going forward. And part of that going forward, which I think links to being intergenerational and wanting to see the union grow, is that democracy isn't, as with elections in the real world, in society, democracy in NZEI isn't and shouldn't be limited to kind of electing our branches and our union officials. It should be about participation and engagement. And so I think we have some really exciting opportunities that we're investing in at the moment to give us some of the digital platforms and the information and ways of communicating with people that can really help us engage a lot more people. It's never going to be an alternative to or a substitute for face-to-face, because kanohi ki kanohi is where we as humans engage. That's where we really tell our stories and really both have those courageous conversations and also the fun. But that doesn't mean that we can't do a lot more online, and that is where a lot of us, not just young people, spend a lot of our time. So we need to be giving people the opportunity to engage and participate together. And that means also, I think, a flatter sort of democracy that's less hierarchical perhaps than we've had in the past. So moving on to this last of the 5 ideas, National Executive and Te Reo Ariari have talked about being some collective rangatiratanga, collective, I guess, agency and leadership and responsibility for us in the education system as educators. That means rangatiratanga that is giving people both the opportunity and responsibility for leadership. I think we can't do that without a sense of collaborative leadership, and that means within the union and within the education system. And I see the metaphor being, for me, one of essentially a cluster of kauri on a ridge in the ngāhere, in the bush, that we are all different sizes of kauri maybe, but actually kauri are an ecosystem. They don't grow normally on their own. And they feed on each other in a symbiotic way. And as a union, we have a chance to really harness our collective intelligence to really, I think, make a better impact, a bigger collective impact. So finally, I've come to this metaphor of a whare, which is familiar to lots of people I know. I think the foundation is that we need to grow members and have more power, impact more powerfully on the shape of the education system. we can do that by building that power of collective rangatiratanga, and digital organising and collaborative leadership are ways in which we can really support that, so that we can end up with that vision of a teaching and learning system, an education system that really puts teaching and learning and the concept of Māori first at the heart, something that's quite transformative and is potentially a journey rather than a destination. But I think we need to have that ambition, and I hope you're kind of excited by some of those ideas. They might seem a long way from coming out of the classroom or coming out of your service to hear me talk, but I hope they connect with some of the ideas that you're familiar with, and give you some sense of the ambition I've got for the union. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Steph. I'm really glad that you finished off by touching on that word ambition, because I know both National Exec and Te Reo Ariari was struck by the ambition that you've got for where we can be as a union, and we're really excited about coming on this journey with you. We do have the chance for people to ask questions, and so please do pop them into the chat, and we'll look to get to as many of them as we can. In the interest of everyone's evening, we will wrap tonight up at 6:30. Steph, to get the ball rolling though, for a lot of members, they won't actually know what the role of National Secretary does. Can you talk about what you see the role as being, and then how that connects in with members?
Well, fundamentally, I think the National Secretary and all staff are here to serve the interests of members, and hopefully that's a really robust partnership most of the time. I think that as effectively the chief executive, if you like, of the union, it is about making sure that we have an alignment between what members see as the goals and aspirations for them and what staff are working on to support that and scaffold that into being. So essentially it's, as I said, maybe the fattest, oldest, biggest Kāori on the ridge, but not the only one, because I think what the strength of the current union actually is that we have very strong partnerships between member leaders and staff, and that's a very powerful combination.
Kia ora. The next question we've got here is that we're a union with over 100 years worth of history. How do you see that being utilised as we move forward? Well, I think,
we should always acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of other people, and we were reflecting today briefly as a staff about on the anniversary of the Christchurch mosque killings, and I was reflecting that these events don't happen out of nowhere. Everything has a history, a whakapapa. So I think what the union has, the union's journey has paralleled the education system in many ways, for good or ill. I remember when we were doing some research into the pay equity claim for primary teachers and ECE teachers, that at one point there was a committee for women within NZEI that was campaigning for fair pay parity with the men, and the men didn't want it. So, we've moved internally in our culture, and I think it's great that we can acknowledge the good and the bad, and the progress that we've made as a union, to being, I think, one of the most fantastic unions on the planet. I mean, I think we do great things, and we can do more, but we definitely come with our history, and that's a really important part of it. And I think for any of you who have been in our building, on every floor there are taonga that tell a story. We have the pictures of all the presidents from right back at the beginning on the wall of the boardroom, and that's an ongoing reminder of the fact that we're just passing through.
Kia ora. There's a comment here that people are enjoying your kōrero about democracy within our union. Are you able to talk a little bit more about what your thinking is around that flatter democracy, and what that might look like for a member on the ground?
Well, I think that I see it in concentric circles. I think that it's important that the concept of representative democracy, that people come together to elect representatives to take ideas forward, I think that's a really important concept, and it's kind of a little bit under, I think a bit undervalued now, really, in terms of why it's important. Because I see a lot of other organisations where people get maybe elected to a position or nominated and then essentially just go off their own experience and don't feel that they need to represent other people. So I think when I think about democracy, I think about there are two aspects of it. There's that representative aspect, which I think we absolutely need to build and retain. And then I think there's also what I would call day-to-day democracy, which is about people actually feeling in union, feeling that they are participating in decisions or conversations that are forming decisions. Because I think without that, you can get very removed from members on the ground. And so I think that essentially is what I'm saying, that I think we can strengthen the ways in which people can engage and make them more relevant in the kind of digital space that a lot of us are now living a lot of our lives.
So we've got a couple of questions here about regulations in the early childhood sector. And so what do you say about the government's review of early childhood regulations? Do you have the agreement of members to the standards they want?
This is always interesting when we've got a new change in parliamentary legislation or submissions on things, for example, like the network planning parts of the ECE service, or it could be other aspects of it. So in some cases, we have long-standing policy that has gone through even annual conference, certainly through National Executive. And in other places, we're pulling together members to advise us. In other places, we're relying on a reference group or a network of people. So in the case of the ECE regs, I guess what we're doing is we'll come together with some of the ECE member leaders to make sure that we've developed a position that is consistent with our big picture thinking about ECE and the fact that we know that the current model, highly privatised, highly atomised, is not working for either kaiako or in fact for the sustainability of most services. So I think there are a number of ways in which we end up with a policy position, if that's what you're asking. But it's definitely informed by members' experience and members' views that have come through often years of conversation.
So this one here is similar but different. What can Te Reo do to change terms and conditions for all sectors in the early childhood sector?
Well, probably you won't be surprised to hear that we need to get people to join the union, and we also need to make sure that we, I think, are really responsive, and we've tried to be that support through COVID. For example, during the various lockdowns, we've brought together members and non-members actually. For example, with in the first lockdown, the Evolve chain was trying to reduce people's conditions by putting them all on effectively 20-hour contracts and then getting them to just be available for another 20 hours. And this last time, Kindercare, another big chain, was trying to force people to use their annual leave rather than pay them during the epidemic. So those are the kind of things that we're doing on a constant rolling basis. But in the end, it is about both joining people up, and ECE Voice was all about saying, okay, we haven't always been relevant, we haven't always been visible in the ECE space in the way we know that teachers are asking, and so we're trying to change that. So that's something the union itself has to change. We can't just blame people for not being union members. And the other side of it, I think, is that we need to make sure that when there are legal or legislative instruments, and an example is the Fair Pay Agreement legislation that is due to go into Parliament shortly, when those opportunities come up, that we really rally the troops and our resources and work together with members to get good legislation and then implement it in the way we have with pay equity legislation for the betterment of members.
This next one is a comment, and I think it picks up on some of the digitisation thinking that you've shared. I'm concerned that face-to-face paid union meetings will end up in the too hard basket, and I think that would be a pity because it's the most immediate connection between members and staff, even if it is raw?
I don't think anybody prefers virtual page union meetings. I mean, I think they have been necessary, but I don't think we'd ever want to stop having face-to-face ones. So that doesn't mean that everyone will be face-to-face, I think, in future, but I think it's really, as I said, there is nothing like kanohi ki kanohi in terms of being in a room with a lot of people and feeling that collective strength together. It's a bit like being in a choir, you know, singing on your own on Zoom is really sad, right? Being together in a room and singing with a group of people is fantastic. So yeah, there's definitely a difference in the dynamic, and we don't want to trade that away.
Yep. I think you'll like this one. How will you look after our field staff so that they can be in top condition to support members with campaigns?
Well, I think one of the things that I've been thinking in terms of staff generally is that if we're asking them to do big things, to share our ambition, then we really need to make sure that they're supported and they're doing the learning themselves. So part of that is that I want to introduce a kind of wānanga concept where people can come together and there's some really intentional learning that happens as part of staff development. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is that we're trying to be clear about what we need to prioritise and be clearer with staff about where effort is really needed. And I think that means sometimes rethinking the way we've done things, but often it's just about, you know, maybe not duplicating some things that are already happening, but doing things smarter. So I think that's an evolving thing. Again, field staff are all human. They're going to have times where they're going to feel stretched. But I think, as with union members, people are prepared to go the extra mile if they also know that they're trusted to, you know, take the time when they need it to look after themselves. So that's my approach generally.
Kia ora. We've probably got time for two more. NZEI Te Reo is a broad church which can be our greatest strength. It also provides challenges to ensure that we're all on the same page. What are your ideas for keeping us all on the same page? Very cool question.
Yeah. Well, when I first started at NZEI Te Reo, I used to think of my aunt and uncle a lot because I didn't probably agree with them on, I'd say 50% of my view of the world. But they were absolutely passionately committed to public education and to quality teaching and learning for tamariki. You know, I have absolutely there was no line between us on that. And so that's what I come back to, is that like schools and services, the union is a permanent feature of the education system. You know, we're here for good. It's like our relationship with governments. We can wholly oppose a government policy, but we are in permanent relationship with governments because we work in the public education system. And so that's kind of my view in some ways about members. I mean, I'm not saying they're like an opposition government, some of them, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying members are absolutely entitled to the views they hold. And I think we're all learning about how we move better to consensus, how we move better to identify what key issues are for people. And so I think the main thing I need to do is keep a listening ear. And I'm putting in some processes to make sure that I'm doing that with staff, and I'm looking forward to thinking about how I can do that with members too.
We're just going to wrap up with a bit of a softball question. Can you tell us what you like to do for fun?
Well, actually, I really like hanging out with my kids. And so my idea of a totally fun thing is to be up at Matapoti on the beach, usually at Whale Bay, for anybody who knows Whale Bay, with my little gas cooker, and we're cooking bacon sarnies and a vegetarian alternative for my youngest son on the beach, and the sun's setting, and we've just we've just had a swim and a snorkel and played a game of tag on the beach. And you know, even though they're almost adult now, really, that's still my absolute idea of fun, hanging out.
Kia ora, Steph. Thanks so much for sharing over the last half an hour. And thank you to all those people that have joined us tonight and those that have taken the time to ask questions and comments. If I've understood Steph right, this is the very beginning of a conversation and an incredibly exciting time to be involved with NZEI Te Reo. So once again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'll just finish with that whakatauki from the beginning. Ko e mate whiki, mate ururoa. It's better, don't die like an octopus, die like a hammerhead shark. Ka kite anō.
Ka kite.